So you are in the right spot. If you are looking for an early preview of the data from a nationwide survey of K-12 computer science teachers from the Kapor Center and CSTA, we're so pleased to have you joining us. And before we start, I'd like to turn it over to Jake Baskin, who's the Executive Director of CSTA.
Thanks, BT, and hi, everyone. It is wonderful to see a lot of familiar names and faces here and lots of new ones as well. Thanks so much to everyone for joining us today. I just wanted to kick off by saying, first off, a huge thank you to Alexis and the Kapor Center for partnering with us on this work. It's really exciting to be releasing this. It was almost a year and a half ago now when we could still see people in person when the idea behind this was hatched, and it's just great to see everything come to fruition, and we're so excited to share results with you all. I also just really want to highlight how proud we are to be using this as an opportunity to elevate teacher voice and try our best to connect all the work that is happening in this space with where teachers are and what they need. And we hope that these results will be an opportunity to really guide future work in supporting CS teachers in an incredibly challenging environment right now. And last, I just want to say happy CS Ed Week to you all. As BT has up on the slide, there are lots of activities and calls to action happening this week, and we really encourage you to head over to csedweek.org and identify other opportunities to engage. And I especially want to shout out for the non-teachers on this call that on Friday, we want to do our best to celebrate and thank CS teachers for all of the work that they're doing. So please take some time to check out what we have planned for that week, and make sure to contribute your own thanks on social media on Friday. So with that, I'll turn it back over to BT and Alexis and say thanks again. Talk to you all soon.
Great. Thanks, Jake. So we'd like to introduce ourselves. My name is Brian Tworick, or BT, and I'm Director of Education for CSTA.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alexis Martin. I'm the Director of Research Partnerships at the Kapor Center.
And we're also joined by many of our colleagues from the Kapor Center and CSTA, and it's probably without saying, but many people have contributed work to this project. So thanks all for being here and for your efforts. Today, we are going to give an early preview of the forthcoming CS Teacher landscape report. So the purpose of this is to know who CS teachers are across the United States. What is their background? What are their challenges? What should we prioritize as a result? And we're going to show some of the key parts of that. And we're going to share some key findings. We plan to release the report as well as a teacher demographic state dashboard in early next calendar year. And we're excited to give you a sneak peek. So let's start with what is this survey and who are the teachers? What do we know about the teachers in the US? So CSTA and the Kapor Center conducted a survey that is 63 items, and that's divided into 7 different sections, as you can see here. Those are the demographics of the teacher, the school context, teacher satisfaction with their CS teaching, as well as with the curriculum, about culture responsive pedagogy, and professional development. The number of items per section ranged a bit, but that's how we bucketed questions. We distributed this widely between May and July 2020 and incentivized the first 3,000 teacher participants. In total, we had nearly 3,700 K-12 computer science in the United States. It's not perfectly representative of the teaching force in the United States or of CS teachers, but it does represent all 50 states, and it has roughly the same breakdown of the teaching force in terms of like race and gender. And so it is in line with what we expect, but not perfectly representative. So I'd like to start by sharing, let's skip the slide. Who are these teachers? This is based on our almost 3,700 teacher responses. As you can see, the teaching force is predominantly female and predominantly white. For most of the analysis, we bucketed the race and ethnicity categories into BIPOC in order to encompass Black, Latinx, American Indian, Alaskan Native, and Pacific Islander. You can see the age distribution across here, as well as what courses teachers teach. So we asked teachers different questions based on the grade levels they teach. Of the elementary and middle school teachers, about half said they teach standalone or discrete CS classes, whereas the other half show that they teach integrated computer science. Of the high school teachers, you can see the distribution of what they teach. Note across the board, these numbers don't add up to 100% because most of them allow the opportunity to select multiple options. And these percentages show the percent of all 3,700 of those teachers because some teach multiple grade bands. Of the elementary courses, about half of those are mandatory or compulsory, whereas the other half are elective. And of the 912 courses, about 46% of them are CTE courses. Another interesting kind of factoid that came from this is that we asked teachers, what's your primary reason for teaching computer science? And nearly 60% of them said it's because computer science is an important life skill for my students. I want to share a bit about the background of teachers and their preparation. So the primary two credentials that teachers have are computer science, as well as career technical education, or CTE. The majority of other respondents had other credentials, which is like multiple subjects for elementary or secondary math or another discipline. There were about 4% of respondents who did not have a credential. For years teaching, you can see that the first row here is how many years they've taught any K-12 subject. And the second row, second bar, is how many years they've taught computer science in K-12. And perhaps as expected, we see a larger distribution across who teaches in general. We see many more late career teachers. That's much more teaching experience, but less experience with teaching computer science. So as expected, most of the teachers have taught another subject before coming into computer science. And for their college preparation, the majority of teachers took some CS classes at some point. And then you can see the distribution of some CS, no CS, major or minor. Additionally, about 48% of respondents noted that they have had some tech or computing industry experience that was technical. And of those, about half, 51% reported that was 5 years or more of industry or tech experience. The top majors for teachers, the top was education at about 23%. Computer science and related fields was about 17%. Engineering was close after that. And then the next highest ranking were mathematics and business. Thanks to some wonderful colleagues at the Kapor Center, especially Laura Hinton, who's on the call, she has prepared an interactive state dashboard to present teacher demographics. And so the way that this is a screenshot of it, the way it works is on the left-hand side, there's a map of the US, and you can select the state. Then on the right side, it will update with the information we've collected from the teacher respondents of the survey. And it will present this high-level information of the background characteristics of these teachers. And then another neat feature is in that upper right-hand corner, there are filters. So you can filter down to the grade bands of it being K-8 or high school, and also some school characteristics. So the first one is the percent of students who qualify for free and reduced price lunch as an indicator for low-income families. And then the second is what proportion of the student population identifies as BIPOC. We are very excited to release this, and that will also come early 2021. The last thing I want to share is that some of the school context of teachers surveyed. So you can see here the distribution of who are the what are the schools that teachers come from? And we see more teachers coming from schools with a higher concentration of like low need. And that's perhaps as expected, because we know from things like the State of CS report that CS is more likely to be offered at schools that serve students from like non-marginalized communities. In addition, we classified the school context in terms of geography as either urban or rural, and over 90% of respondents were from urban settings, so less than 10 from rural. Okay, I'm going to turn over to Alexis to get to the interesting stuff.
Thank you, BT. And I think that stuff the demographics is quite interesting. I see a question in the chat about how the survey was distributed. It was distributed through the CSTA listserv, as well as a number of other avenues with our outreach contacts, social media, targeted social media. Yeah, it'll all be in the method section too of our report, but it was widely distributed. So it wasn't just CSTA teachers, although that was the bulk of the respondents. So thanks, BT, and thanks again to everyone, our colleagues who are part of this work. We want to specifically, again, give a huge thanks to Sonia Koshi and Laura Hinton from Kapor Center, who did extensive data analysis and the dashboard creation. So our first product that came from this report, I'm sorry, from this survey was, and you may have seen this before, so we're just going to go through it quickly, a data brief that came out in October. You have the link here. If you haven't seen it and you're interested, it is around the impact of COVID-19 on CS education. Here's a few of our just top level findings from the report, just to give you a taste. 42% of the teachers found distance learning to be a major challenge, which was the highest rank option possible. So some of the things they were challenged to, some of the challenges they were dealing with were how to keep students engaged, how to teach CS given students' lack of computers and internet access. That's a theme that we saw throughout the survey analysis. And we do find that CS education equity gaps are at risk of widening due to COVID-19. So for example, there are disparities in schools serving underrepresented students, rural students, and low-income students. 52% of the teachers in high poverty schools saw distance learning as a major challenge versus just 36% in low poverty. And we saw digital divide challenges at a rate 3 times higher than teachers in high income schools, high poverty schools at a rate 3 times higher than teachers in the higher income schools. And BT is going to be keeping an eye on the chat in case you have any Q&As. We will also be able to, BT, just interrupt me if there's one that we should address right away, and otherwise we'll have Q&A at the end. And then, so some more initial findings, next slide. So this is some general teaching challenges. These are just some select ones. We'll have more in our forthcoming report, but by comparing by school demographics to demonstrate some disparities that we found. So ranking certain challenges as a major challenge, which is the highest option on the scale, you can see that there are large differences in the teachers who are at low poverty schools versus high poverty, and schools that have the highest percentages of underrepresented students versus the lowest percentages. You can see right there, there's pretty stark comparisons in terms of the lack of hardware, software resources, curricular resources, student subject knowledge, lack of support and interest by school staff. And that means generally administrators and counselors. When I can interpret that based on the qualitative data. So similarly, and if you want us to go back to any slides, just let me know. We saw similar kinds of, and this is interesting, around the grade level and teaching. We saw similar kinds of comparisons. 9 through 12 actually were facing fewer of those teachers ranked these challenges as a major challenge versus K-8. So, and these are slightly different ones that we wanted to highlight. So similarly, we did see the lack of hardware, software, and curriculum, but we also see lack of appropriate assessments, a lack of teacher subject knowledge. So that was about themselves. And then also the lack of support or interest by school staff. So those are some interesting differences that we found that we wanted to briefly highlight. And then we had an open-ended, couple open-ended questions where around supports that teachers wanted. What are some ways that supports for you can be improved? And what suggestions would you give to policymakers to improve conditions? So there were a number of responses to this open-ended question, but the most frequent fell into 3 categories. One was more collaboration and professional learning communities, mentorship, and free, I'm going to emphasize that again, free computer science professional development where teachers don't have to pay out of their own pockets to attend. And that's both content and pedagogy. The second area that we saw the most frequent responses to open-ended questions was around making CS a core class, making it mandatory, making it not an elective. And the third area is updated and more hardware, software, better Wi-Fi, one-to-one laptops, a dedicated lab. That all fell into that bucket. So I wanted to walk through this chart briefly. We have a hypothesis based on this. What you can see here is that the teachers in the schools with the smallest percentages of students getting free and reduced price lunch, 25% or less, are really focused on how to improve the teaching, right? So not to say that other teachers aren't, but we see a higher percentage of those teachers worrying about how to get more professional development and collaboration and making the class mandatory, how to improve the class and how to get everyone taking the class, right? And then, but then when you look at the schools where there's the highest 75% and above low income students, the concerns, there was a drastic difference here between the concerns around the hardware, software, and internet, right? So what BT and I were talking about is, okay, so it looks like actually the less resourced school, or sorry, the teachers in the schools with the highest percentage of of low-income students are really focused on how to just even get the class happening, right? How to have the basic, and as we also highlighted in the previous slide, how to have the basics so that the class can even occur. And then, you know, maybe second to that would be how to improve the classes and how to make them mandatory. So that's kind of something we're proposing as a hypothesis, and maybe we can have a bit of a discussion in the Q&A about that. And so some other selected key findings, we have some scales that included a number of items within our survey. So this engagement with computer science scale had some items, things like, I enjoy teaching computer science. I see myself as a computer science teacher. I plan to continue for at least 5 years, and a number of other items. So we found that the high school teachers were more engaged. Teachers in high income schools were more engaged. And then similar trends around engagement for teachers with more experience teaching, and specifically with teaching CS. And then we had another scale, educator connection to CS community, which included items such as, I feel part of a community of computer science teachers. I have the opportunity to collaborate with other computer science teachers, and I have professional support necessary to be successful, among some other items. So in that regard, what we found was that the teachers in the higher income schools, or schools that have the smallest percentages of low income students, are more connected to the CS community than teachers in low income schools. We found, this is interesting, male teachers were more connected to the CS community. And then similarly, we had trends for among teachers that have more experience teaching, and specifically more experience in teaching computer science. And another scale we wanted to go through is actually several scales where some of the examples around culturally relevant computer science teaching. So like the level of agreement with the statement, effective computer science teaching incorporates diverse cultures and experiences. And then levels of confidence around using culturally relevant pedagogy to support learning, teaching students from diverse backgrounds, and teaching students with disabilities. So a number of other items made up these analyses we utilized for these analyses, but here are the findings, which really are going to inform some of our recommendations. We found that underrepresented computer science, oh, sorry, let me just really quick go through it. CS teachers of color are more likely than teachers of other backgrounds. You can see here, they're more likely to believe they can influence student engagement, more confident in implementing CRP in computer science, and place a greater value on it as well. So again, so back to the recommendations, thanks BT. These are early preliminary recommendations. We're going to have a fuller list in our forthcoming report, but we certainly would advocate for increasing the number of underrepresented computer science teachers of color, closing the digital divide, investing in teacher PD and learning communities, and with a specific emphasis on culturally relevant computing, and prioritizing CS as a core course. So all of these recommendations are nothing new to the folks on the call. I'm sure you all have seen these, advocated for these, and are strong believers, but we're going to have them fleshed out further in our report with a lot of data to accompany the why, and to be able to use for advocacy for these, making these recommendations come to fruition. So I think next slide. We've got about 7 minutes left. We want to open up for Q&A and discussion. And we know a lot of people on the call are also teachers. So if you have anything you want to share around your own experiences, we welcome it. And BT, I'm sure, I see the chat has blown up. So please feel free to let me know if there's anything we need to address.
Others have questions, please post in the chat and we can call on you to introduce it. I see a question from Jeff. Jeff, do you want to unmute and say your question?
Not at the moment because I barely have an internet connection.
Okay, sorry for that.
Irony there.
Jeff asked, how does the breakdown of teachers with a CS background in K-8 compare to teachers of 9-12? And does it have an impact on engagement with the CS field?
We do have that information around like credentials and CS experience and tech experience. And we will be including that in our report, but does that have an impact on engagement is actually a really interesting way to think about it. And that may be part of the reason for some of these comparisons. So we're certainly going to explore that for this report. So thank you. I'm not going to try and pull those out right in the next couple minutes, but we'll certainly have it included in there. So thank you for that.
And Sarah asked, will the demographic report also compare CS teachers to the entire teaching profession?
Oh, that's interesting. We hadn't thought about that yet, but I think that that could be an interesting comparison, and we'll discuss with the team.
It's a tricky thing. We were trying to determine how representative the survey is of CS teachers that exist. And it's a challenging question to answer because there is no better survey than the one we've conducted in terms of its reach in CS teachers. And unlike many other subjects, it's less likely for teachers to be a dedicated CS teacher. When we asked what % responsibility is CS teaching in your role, it was pretty evenly distributed across kind of quartiles of the % of teaching that they spent on computer science. And so often CS teachers may actually identify as a math teacher or as an elementary classroom teacher. And so it is a really hard question to answer. We can say that we're also comparing the respondent data to CSTA membership, which we believe is a strong indicator of the community. And it seems in line, roughly in line with that.
Thanks, BT. Agreed.
Ira asked about administrators being surveyed or about teachers being asked about administrator support because of the critical role they play.
There were some teachers, okay, so the administrator support came into play, and there was a feeling that there wasn't enough administrator support, and actually, just looking at the chat, yeah, that definitely came up, and so that'll also be in the report. They really do, as you said, Ira, they play a huge role. We saw administrator support playing a huge role in the choices around what courses were suspended during COVID and what has been prioritized. And I would agree, encouraging teachers to integrate CS. Yeah, that definitely came up in our findings.
And in regards to the question of were administrators surveyed, the answer was no. It was specifically for K-12 CS teachers. And in the United States, so those that did not meet those criteria were excluded from the analysis. However, Google, in partnership with Gallup, has done a number of surveys over the years, specifically for administrators, as well as parents and other stakeholder groups, to look at perceptions and both perceptions and actual practice of course access. And so those are on the Google CS EDU research page.
And I should mention too that we'll send out both the report and the dashboard link to all the attendees of this webinar. Thanks for that link. Yeah, that's really helpful. To all the folks who attended, that you'll be getting it. And we also want to plug, there's actually, the reason that this webinar got shortened a little bit was for folks in California, there's another webinar starting in a couple minutes about the utilization of data to advocate for equity in California schools around CS. So BT, do you have that link, or we can drop it in the chat if anyone's interested from California?
I am afraid that if I navigate away, I won't get back to the screen.
You know what? I'm going to grab it.
Okay, and we have about 2 minutes left. Does anyone have a last minute question? I see lots of great comments in the chat. So I'd like to share, I saw Kalisha, a colleague at the Kapor Center, commented that you can learn about the Equitable CS Curriculum Initiative at the Kapor Center. She wrote a link. Maybe she can repost it so it appears at the bottom. They have a wonderful newsletter as well as a monthly webinar series in order to learn more. And so they're working to tackle this. Another thing I'd like to raise is that a CSTA group called the Equity Fellows, a group of teacher leaders, is organizing the first ever, whatever they're calling, the Equity in Action Summit. And it is a one-day professional development experience designed to help teachers learn and adopt inclusive teaching practices. So excited for that. You can look up for that on March 6th, and we just opened registration for it. And with that, we are right at time. I want to say thank you so much for coming. As Alexis noted, we'll follow up via email with some resources, and you're also welcome to reach out to us if you have suggestions before we release the final report and other questions.
Thank you all so much. And thank you for all your hard work in supporting computer science education.
Happy CSS week, everyone.
Take care.